Hello, my name is Dr. Alaina Szlachta. I work with learning leaders and professional development companies to give them the data they need to tell powerful stories of impact. You're tuning in to Measurement Made Easy, our very first on demand episode. In today's session, we have a case study that features how to measure the health of a community, a learning community, a community of practice, a space where people get together for a very specific reason, and we want to keep that community sticky and intact. Well, having a measurement system in place to know the health of the community gives us the data that we need to know if we're providing and supporting the community in the right ways to deliver the experience that people want to keep that community sticky, because stickiness is what leads to retention. And well, retention is the name of the game, especially in a community that is designed to bring in revenue for a professional development company, or is designed to be a safe space for people to practice and for people to develop skills in a meaningful way. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the fantastic Peter Williamson and Alex Schumann from Barometer XP, who are the focus of our case study in today's session. So Alex, if you don't mind, tell us just a little bit about yourself, maybe why Barometer, why you're up to this amazing work that you're doing, and then we'll turn it over to Peter.
Yeah, so I'm Alex. I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Barometer. The last 10 years of my career, I was in organizational development, so doing consulting and trying to help companies and organizations become more efficient and focusing a lot on the process piece. But what I realized is if the people aren't getting along, if you don't have a solid culture, if you don't have trust and connection and a solid understanding of where each piece fits into the broader puzzle, you really can't get very far in terms of process improvement and getting organized. So that's where the idea from Barometer came on my end, is how do you bring some sort of activities and games to create experiential learning, to build those relationships and build those interpersonal skills.
Awesome. Yeah, and I love on Barometers, when you search Barometer XP on Google, it says like a team development company. And I just want to say that you're using games and activities as a way to build awesome teams to make organizations better. And I just love that those connections are all there. And part of what we're doing in this case study is helping you to measure and monitor how well is that mission being fulfilled. And I'm so excited. Peter, tell us, why Barometer for you? Why did you get involved in this startup company?
Sure. And for the Monty Python fans out there, now for something completely different. I don't have an organizational development background. I come from a family of educators. And so naturally, interested and passionate about kind of helping people become their best self. I was a professional athlete for about 6 years after my college. And high performing athletes look a lot like high performing teams. Setting up spaces for people to learn and grow is kind of falls right in that wheelhouse of education and kind of creating social good. As I come from the athlete world, games are naturally kind of a driving factor of a lot of the things that I do. I'm hyper competitive, but love a good collaborative game too. And Alex and I got together a number of years ago now and started thinking about how games and play could intersect with organizational development. And so thus, Barometer was born.
Love it. And I have had the pleasure of being involved in Barometer just kind of on the sidelines as an advisor and a friend and colleague. And I'm just so happy to have you all here and have this conversation. So what we're talking about today, just to give a little bit more context, and feel free, Alex and Peter, to direct me if what I'm sharing is inaccurate or has changed since we last spoke. But Barometer is offering a membership. And so there's a couple of different things that are included in the membership. Of course, the games, an amazing assessment tool that helps field people to the right game with the instructions and the why and the how it can help with their larger mission of improving teams and then therefore organizations. And another piece of the membership is the community. And so what we're focusing on measuring specifically today is the health of the community part of that membership. Because as we know, just buying a product, in your case, a game, knowing how to use it, and even being able to track how effective that game was implemented and what it did for the team development, that's all awesome. But the community piece is really magical. All of the facilitators and the people who are using your games and having different levels of success or challenges, bringing them together is the sticky part, I think, of your membership. And we want to make sure, or you've told me, you want to make sure that that is really healthy. And so our challenge and also opportunity today is to figure out, well, what are those indicators of health? And then how do we realistically, with the systems, tools, time, knowledge, and expertise that you have, and just timeline, how do you set up a minimum viable system to start tracking the health of your community? Knowing all the while, and I'll say this in every case study, that when we make measurement easier, which is the goal of these case studies, we start simple, small, do a stepwise process because we can always add more complexity later. And the reality is, we don't need to be so complex in the beginning because taking baby steps actually allows us to figure out what's the next best layer of complexity to add in versus trying to do the whole shebang all at once. And so our goal, and I think you both will agree, is let's get those indicators of health clear, and then we'll talk about the systems piece. Now that we've heard a little bit more about Alex and Peter and what they're up to at Barometer XP and what we are up to today in our case study, the first question that I have for you before we dive into the next excerpt is, if you have a learning community, what is the purpose of that community? Why does it exist? What's the result that you're hoping to get out of having that community, managing that community, or starting that community in the first place? Think about this question as you watch the next video.
When you see a team that's engaged and they trust and they have that kind of diversity, there's this sense of inquiry. People really like to ask questions and just sort of probe the group. And so I think of health being just active and engaged.
Awesome. Alex, anything else that you want to add to that sort of vision of health for your community?
Yeah, I think the community that we are trying to build are other practitioners who work with teams, who do culture work and learning and development and coaching. And, you know, there's a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different approaches to that. And at least initially, as we're just getting this community started, we want people who, like, you know, how Peter and I first met, we were really excited to share ideas with each other because we knew that whatever we created by the sharing of ideas was going to be better than what we could come up with on our own. And that's something, since Barometer started as a baby idea to what it is now, at every step, it's been ideas that came from other people who are now collaborators. I'm sure some of your ideas have directly contributed. In fact, I can think of a few examples. So we want to create an environment where people feel inspired to give and share their own knowledge and share their own ideas and their feedback because they know it's going to be creating something better and bigger than any of us could do on our own. And really are trying to elevate this field of game-based experiential learning in the professional development space. And so people who feel not only are they trying to benefit their own career, but they're trying to grow this field as well.
Now that we've heard why the community is important for Alex and Peter at Barometer XP, the next question that I want you to think about is, what does healthy look like in your community? Why we're starting with what does healthy look like and letting you share from like your heart and the mission of your company is that that's what's going to make the data that we get the most meaningful for you. Because there's best practices out there that might say, oh, the health of your community is based on these 5 things, but none of them align with your values. So I like to lead with what makes the most sense to you for your company, because that's a key differentiator.
Yeah.
All that being said,
yeah,
go ahead.
Just jumping in and saying, like, Barometer is very much positioned as sort of a public benefit corporation. So thinking about values is, you know, this is a triple bottom line kind of organization. It's people, planet, profit. And so, you know, I love that approach in thinking about values instead of, you know, values may include economic success, but it also will include kind of the people and culture around it.
Alex and Peter want to have a highly engaged community, and they want trust to be present. So that's really great. Those would be what I consider the goals or the results that we're looking to have for the community. Said another way, it's the story that we want the data that we collect to tell. We want to tell the story that the community at Barometer XP has a trusting space, a safe space, and is full of highly active members. So that's great. Now we have to collect metrics to be able to tell that story. So, what are some of the metrics that we can collect in order to show that trust and a highly engaged community is actually present? So, let's tune into this next clip to see what Alex and Peter have to say to give us some ideas of metrics. What's another indicator that trust is present in the community?
I think people willingly sharing their own knowledge. I think us putting stuff out on a regular basis and making sure it's high quality and staying accountable to that is really important. And then for us, an indicator is when we ask for things or when there is an opportunity for people to share ideas that they're sharing and we're receiving. And that takes, on other practitioners' part, that some people might say, oh, I don't want to share my ideas because then other people might use them and they'll take them. And that's a fine mindset, but that's not really conducive for the community that we're building. So people that are willingly sharing their tools and sharing their ideas.
Yeah. There's like a quantitative and a qualitative metric to that, right? Like if you could measure the number of things people are posting in the community, and you could also try to start measuring the quality of those things, right? How many other people are using them or referring them or looking things up. So engagement with the content that's being shared between people feels like if more people are sharing and there are more unique users on the platform, that feels like you're building a community that people are spending time on, right? At the end of the day, if they're willing to spend time on something, probably trusted enough.
Yeah, yeah. And what I love about the idea sharing and the tool sharing is it actually gets us a metric that spans both of the overarching things that we want to monitor, which is engagement and then trust. So the idea is if people are sharing ideas and tools freely and even giving feedback, that might be another thing, is how much feedback are people giving when it's requested, or even requests for feedback, that kind of stuff. There's got to be trust for the question to be put out there and trust for the feedback to also be given, which gives us both the trust and the engagement. So I'd say that let's start with these things, because you're going to get engagement analytics broadly speaking. You'll know from whatever tool you adopt for your community, you're going to see the percent of people who are logging in and frequencies. That just comes baked into whatever tool you adopt. But what becomes a bit more complex then is how do you facilitate systematically, because the way that we set up the community will also inform how we measure and track it. So for example, if we just wanted to set up idea and tool sharing and feedback, it would be easy for us to have a Slack channel or something equivalent, but it's a designated space that people go and share ideas and get feedback or test stuff, like a testing lab zone, something like that. And if you have a designated channel, then it's really easy to track like what percent of people are engaged in that specific idea sharing thought leadership space compared to other sections of the membership. And that the idea being if that's high or highest, then it's a really healthy space and trust is taking place. The limitation to that, forcing people into sharing ideas in a specific space, is that, well, what if they want to share it in a different way? And so part of building measurement systems is understanding that if we choose to set up a specific channel or a specific zone for something and people aren't engaging, well, then why is that happening? So for now, we can maybe choose to go in a direction like that or another one because it's easy to measure. But then when we start to monitor the health as we're seeing engagement keep in the back of our mind that maybe if there's not a lot of engagement, is it because of how we're creating that space versus that there's a lack of trust? But that's something that we don't know, which is hence like creating a minimum viable system. It gives us a starting place to then inform, are we delivering the product in the right ways, and also are we seeing healthy engagement? So I'll stop talking for now and just turn it back to you and say, because we do want to at least give you some steps to systematically build this out. So what feels good for you in terms of, if we wanted to track idea sharing and feedback, what feels good knowing the kind of space that you're going to have for people to engage in?
It's an interesting question. You mentioned Slack, which is like our current form of communication, right? Both internal as our own team, but also it's a platform that I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with in the space, at least, through our various beta tests and kind of asking questions within the community of practice that we have. And so I think using a tool that's accessible is really important, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want to create some cumbersome tool that people have to like go find in the recess of their email inbox, or corner of their 345 tabs on Chrome, like whatever they're trying to. Whenever they're thinking about how can I participate in this community, it's got to be accessible. It's got to be a, sort of an instinct. And so there's a part of this that's it's almost there's a referral aspect of idea sharing, right? It's both like what's happening in the community, but also like, are they bringing in other people, right? If I think of like really strong communities, at some point you're gonna hit a moment where you're like, you know what, this may not be as useful for me, but I just met another person and they would love this. And if one of the first thing that comes to mind in the community is I would want to share this with someone else, you've got such a greater reach of that community, and it's something that's self-sustaining. Whereas if it's always on Barometer to go and bring in new people, that's going to be a very linear growth of a community, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't have necessarily the same kind of level of impact and idea sharing. So I just wanted to throw that in as kind of another piece of this, right? It's kind of like there's idea sharing within the community, but there's also idea sharing and referring outside of the community.
Outside. So if we zoom out for just a second, let's do a quick recap. Alex and Peter have a membership community. It's part of a subscription model that they're trying to sell to facilitators that do team building training. They want to make sure that that community is sticky. And they've defined sticky as a place where there's trust and a place that has highly engaged members. So now the place that we're at is, how do we collect the right data to be able to tell the story that Barometer XP's membership community is full of trust, or is a trusting space, and has highly engaged members? Well, here's how we decided to track the data, to collect data, to track trust and engagement. So first, with engagement. Now, it's worth being said that there's a million different ways that you can track engagement metrics. And in fact, in some tools, the learning platforms, they already give you that data. So the overarching idea is that we want to see how many of all the members that are in the community, what percent of them are actively engaged on a weekly or monthly basis, meaning that they're posting, they're tuning into live events, whatever is happening inside of your community. The number one metric is, of all of the members, how many are engaging in any way? That's our first metric. The second metric is going to be a little bit more specific, getting us closer to that trust that we want to calculate. So the next is that we want to make sure that people are sharing ideas, that people are sharing resources and best practices, that they feel comfortable doing that. So our second metric is that we want to track specifically how many people are sharing resources, are sharing best practices. And in order to do that in an easy way, we've decided to create a channel specifically for that type of communication. Otherwise, you could imagine looking at every single post that's put out into a community and marking, is that a resource being shared? Is that an idea being shared? Is that a best practice? Instead, if you set up one channel for that type of communication to happen, then it makes it easier to look at, of all the members in the community, what percent are sharing in that particular channel. So that's our second metric. How many people are sharing best practices, ideas, and resources? Because we believe if people are doing that, they have a sense of comfort and trust enough to be a little vulnerable in sharing the things that are working for them. Now, the third and final metric gets us even closer to trust. So, we believed that if trust was present, people would feel comfortable giving feedback in the community. So, that is our third and final metric, which is, of all the members in the community, what percent of people are giving feedback to posts, ideas, questions, etc. So we wanted to track the amount of feedback that was being given and also received as an indicator that if people are feeling trust and comfort in the community, they're going to be more likely to give each other feedback. So that's our third and final metric. So if we wrap it all up, what does a healthy community mean? Well, for Alex and Peter, a healthy community meant that it was highly engaged, which is, of course, the easiest metric to track, but that was also a safe and trusting space measured by people giving each other feedback and people sharing ideas and best practices. So, this isn't necessarily a complex system. We just wanted minimum viable information to be able to see, are we moving in the right direction as we offer this community? Because if people aren't engaging, well, there's a problem. If people are engaging, but they're not sharing ideas, there's a problem. And if people are engaging, sharing ideas, but nobody's giving feedback, the community might not be as sticky as we'd like it to. And depending on how things are moving as we check in every week, it gives us the information to know if our community is healthy or not. So, my suggestion for you is, if you're looking to set up and track the health of your community, to one, know why the community exists. What are we doing this for in the first place? Then ask yourself, okay, what does healthy look like in that context? And then once you know what healthy looks like, ask yourself, what are the best metrics for us to track those particular health indicators? Because there's no right or wrong answer. It's what's easiest and most relevant in your context. So I hope this was helpful. If you want even more information, I've included in the notes with this video a link to the full list of questions and the Barometer XP answers, just as an example as you work through this process for yourself. And of course, if you have questions, if you want to share some ideas, please use the comment section, and myself or perhaps members of our community will share some feedback and give you the answers that you're looking for. I want to wrap up and just take a few minutes or seconds and just say, clearly what you're doing at Barometer is awesome and you're up to some wickedly cool things. And so if people want to learn more about you, if they want to get involved, where should they go? What should they do? And we'll, of course, include any links in our notes for this particular recording.
Yeah, I would say the first thing would be our website, which is barometerxp.com. And we have all kinds of stuff on there, our pressure matrix. You can read about some of the offerings we do in our philosophy. We have a great blog. We're on social media, both individually and as Barometer. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram. Sign up for our newsletter because we do all sorts of game sessions and demos that are very interactive. Make people participate, get to play the games themselves, and that's a really great way to see our approach and understand how what we're doing is different. So those are the big pieces.
If you're looking for support to implement a new measurement system in your organization, there's two ways that I can help. First, apply to be a case study on the show. Get some free coaching to take a few steps further in your measurement and evaluation, and help us all increase our skills in M&E. And lastly, if you're looking for a consultant to give you a bigger system that you could either implement yourself or I can implement on your behalf, happy to help there too. That's all for now.